Hi, this is Lori Moilov with the Limitless podcast, and today I have Jacqueline Quach here with me to talk about abundance, being an artist, a creative, and let me tell you a little bit about Jacqueline. She started in the tech field and was a designer, artist, and she stumbled upon, I guess, energy healing, and then that kind of took a life of its own. I was wondering, Jacqueline, can you tell us a little bit about how that transition happened from being a designer and getting into energy healing and coaching and working with artists?
Yeah, it's been quite a timeline. So I started out um, as a user experience designer. So I was using my creativity for tech. And along the way, I stumbled into energy healing because I was personally going through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, I didn't believe that it worked, but I had a friend recommend me to a healer, and that first energy healing session changed my life.
Wow.
And yeah, and I started studying it, and eventually I ended up getting paid. There was someone who came along and paid me for my work. So I was like, oh, okay, this is working out. And at the same time, my trajectory in my previously chosen career,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work out. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it was a leap of faith at that point. I was like,
Wow.
okay, well, this feels like the thing that I'm here to do. I love helping people. This thing really works. It's changed my life. So I'm just going to do it. So that was about almost 4 years ago, maybe more than 4 years ago. And there was a transition that happened in between because as an energy healing practitioner, I saw that a lot of my clients were artists and creatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I also noticed that I really loved working with them. I feel like everybody's an artist, but
Mm-hmm.
people who can fully embody it or let themselves embody it, I found that they were in touch with a part of themselves that made it joyful and easy for me to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so an epiphany went off, like, oh, I really enjoy working with these people. There's something about it that feels like, for me, it opens something up. So this must be the people I'm meant to serve and
Wow.
help right now. Yeah.
So it feels very synchronistic, like, all these things kind of aligned. And now you work with artists and about abundance and creating that abundance. Can you go into kind of some of that work and maybe share some hacks that help some creatives that may be hitting a wall or stumbling, or they're just like, oh, I don't feel abundant, because there's that demystifying of the starving artist. And can you kind of go into some of that work that you do?
Yeah, of course. So right now, I'm a coach that helps creatives and artists become more abundant. And, for artists and creatives in particular, it can look a few different ways. Like I've noticed that there are different parts of the journey. One of them can be, you're a bit earlier on your path. So, you know, a lot of times money will come through, abundance will come through different sources of income. So you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to gain momentum, making a living as an artist. And in those moments, I find that being persistent, artists who are dedicated to the path, first and foremost, like that sets a foundation. Um, but then, and this goes for all parts of the journey. I noticed that a lot of people who were coming to me felt really disempowered. So, what you said about the myth of the starving artist. So there are many pieces to that. So let me go into the starving artist part
Yeah.
first. So it's an archetype, it's a persona that we all know about, but how it actually plays out is looks a few different ways. One of them that most people can see is, that there are these big companies like record companies, entertainment companies, that have a lot of power and a lot of money. And a lot of times, people who, or it could be galleries, big institutions have all this power and money and, a lot of say in the field that they are in. And so a lot of times artists and creatives will only see those structures, those institutions as where the opportunities are. Well, because they're so visible, because they have so much power. And oftentimes, you get stuck in like a little, like you have tunnel vision, right? Because as long as, your expression, your art being seen, you're making money in the way that you want is in the hands of, or you see it only being from like, I don't know, a gallery, a record company, production company, then yeah, you're gonna feel trapped. So that's one of the ways it comes up. Another one is, the suffering part, and this is a mindset that comes up sometimes, actually quite often. When we think of successful artists and creatives, we also think about people who have suffered. So, for example, Van Gogh, his work is so valuable today, but when he was living, he was barely making it. And part of the reason why he was so poor was because he spent a lot of his money on his materials, his paints, right? So we think about, these people who've made it or whose work really touches people, it only happened after they suffered, after they died. Wow. I mean, pretty much any large figure, artist, creative, what comes to mind right now is like Marilyn Monroe. Like you read these stories or hear these stories, and you're like, wow, they really suffered for their art. But the suffering and the creation, expression of wonderful, touching art, those things are actually separate. So when I work with people, that's the distinction that we start to make. Wow. That, to flip the perspective. First of all, isn't it such a privilege to be in a place where you can decide that you want to walk down this path where you get to express yourself and create and touch people with it, right? It's a choice that you make, right? It's a calling. You don't have to do it, but you're choosing it. And then once you're down that path, if we get a lot of messages about, for example, especially being an actor, actress, right? Being hard or looking a certain way, then we are going to take that on at a subconscious, unconscious level. And then everything that we see and attract from there is going to be hard, like situations that are hard. So, the starving artist archetype is it's like so tangled in a lot of ways with, with people's journeys because, the messages that we hear, because of, the narratives that we inherit about what it means to be an artist. Right? Like if you're a musician, and this is something that you might know really well. Yeah. You either sell your soul and make it big, and make a label enough money after a certain amount of time, and they will pump a lot of money into your music, and then, or you'll be producing music in your living room, putting it out on SoundCloud, making bedroom beats, and like struggling. Like usually those are the two extremes that people think of. And then there's people in between, right? But
Yeah.
it's like, there's almost a perception like until you make it, it's like all or nothing, right? Like the
Yeah.
idea of making it. Um, and so, that kind of makes it hard to enjoy the path.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like, we make art because it's fun, because we enjoy
Yeah.
it. We create because it's fun and we enjoy it. And there's something about that, like being able to create, the motion, the energy, the act of creation that we
Hmm.
can bring into our personal lives. And why not make that fun and
Yeah.
light and joyful, right? Because, you know, sometimes you may face a lot of rejection. There are some
Hmm.
days where you might feel down. So, part of becoming abundant as an artist and creative is allowing the whole journey, the whole process to be joyful.
Hmm.
Because otherwise it's the whole I can't be happy until I, I make it big, get this
Yeah.
deal, until I have this win an Oscar.
Hmm.
Um, but having those things doesn't guarantee that the journey will be, uh, you know, an enjoyable one. It doesn't
Yeah.
guarantee that you're gonna love the art that you make and enjoy
Hmm.
that creation process and you know, have that, because
Yeah.
that part is sacred.
I totally agree with you. I think, like, especially in the creative space, like, it should be really about flowing and having fun. And sometimes when we have these like other images in our mind of like, oh, we should get this grammar Oscar, Emmy, all these different little things. And it's like, that really the focus should be on your journey, and having fun with that journey and not just thinking of the end game, because at the end of the day, whether you get those things or not, like, they don't fully define you, I mean, maybe they're like a benchmark in your journey, but they don't really, like, they're not creating, like, you already created the, like, whatever that was to get there. So you're going to keep creating and having fun with it. So I think it's just like not putting as high a value, I guess. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Yeah, yeah. What happens after you get the thing, win
Hmm.
the award, whatever? Well, you just continue living your life,
Yeah.
right? Or you could think about getting more awards or more prestige. And
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with having your work or your art or your craft acknowledged.
Hmm.
But it's another thing to place that much focus and
Emphasis. Yeah.
power, yeah, into that. Um, and I feel like, sometimes that's where people can feel disconnected from the
Mm.
joy
Yeah.
of creating.
Wow. Yeah, I could definitely feel that, because I know a lot of our creative community is like, we put pressures on ourselves as artists and creatives, and sometimes to get these prestigious awards or hit certain benchmarks and stuff. And that kind of puts the pressure on, sometimes maybe handcuffing us to being creative, like it's like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, I have to have that sense of perfectionism or I won't get XYZ, so wow, that's really an amazing thought to think about as a creative. My other question for you, and you touched a little bit on this, is about healing and pain and suffrage and all that, like, in that combination, I guess, in correlation with creativity, how does, like, I guess, healing and creativity kind of work hand in hand?
Yeah, I would say, creativity is a channel for healing, right? Because there are
Hmm.
all these experiences that we go through. Um, and I know we've talked about it as well, right? Like
Yeah.
a way to express, our experiences, to to move through it, to get it out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
To kind of process and come to terms with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all tied to that. As human beings, we're meant to create.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of how we share what's in here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that it can be out there, right? It's kind of like how, if you don't feel your feelings, they just stay in there. They don't go
Mm-hmm.
away, they just get repressed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, art creation is a channel for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost like saying to yourself, it's okay to feel these things, and actually they can become tangible. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can make it into something, and along the way feel better, feel seen,
Mm-hmm.
um, just you know put it out there, right?
Yeah. Wow.
um,
I totally agree with that. Like being heard, being seen as a creative. And I feel like that's one of the main things that all of our creatives listening on the Limitless podcast is all about. And being that we're about limitlessness and, creativity, I was wondering if there's any abundant hack that you have that you can share for some of our listeners that they can kind of apply just right now today after listening to you.
yeah. This is something that I always love recommending.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, to get really, really specific on what it is that you want. Um, so a lot of times, it might be bouncing around in your head like lofty, like, oh, I just want to make a living off of my craft, or,
Mm-hmm.
I want to do this thing, or, to write really specifically about the opportunities that
Mm-hmm.
you want, like what does that look like? Like maybe there are certain roles that you're auditioning for as an actor, actress,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and there's a certain way you would like them. But to start just writing it down and being
Mm-hmm.
really specific, because once it lives somewhere, it's like, it's acknowledging it. And it's
Mm,
also putting the power in your hands because you're
yeah.
deciding exactly what you want. Um, so then your energy becomes focused, right? Instead of you feel like you're feeling around for opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever I can get, kind of grounds you. Well, this is what I want,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is what I've decided that I'm going to get. So it could be for opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
It could be for, the lifestyle that you want.
Mm-hmm.
It could be for, you know, maybe there's something specific that you'd like. Maybe um, there are certain collaborators that you would like, to just sit down and be like, well, what do I want these collaborators to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Or how would I like it to work out? And be super specific, like really,
Mm-hmm.
really specific. So for example, well, I'd like them to um, be close in proximity so that it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to collaborate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, or that you know, they've worked with, you know, these artists that I like,
Mm-hmm.
right? If somebody came in and said, okay, you can have anything you want, all you need to do
Mm-hmm.
is be specific,
Mm-hmm.
what would you write down?
Wow.
Um, and I like comparing it to, like, if you tell someone that you're hungry and they get you like a taco, but you actually wanted pizza, and the person tells you, oh, why didn't you just tell me you wanted pizza?
Yeah.
That's simple.
So it's kind of like putting your little menu of specifications, like I want this, that, writing it down. And I guess that really kind of becomes the channel to kind of creating that abundance for any creative or artist. Um,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
thing I've received from you is we're all artists. Everyone's an artist, right? And that's why it's like limitless. We're all limitless and we're all limitless creatives. And if there was one last statement and takeaway that you would want to share with some of our listeners, what would that be?
Yeah, it would be that you actually have a lot more power to shape your path than you probably think. Like,
Wow.
so much more.
That's so deep. I feel like we could do like a 3-part series on just that alone. And I guess, Jacqueline, you have these artist circles. Can you go into some of the services that you have and where they can like come and find you?
Yeah. So you mentioned the artist circles. I hold those monthly where we can come and be in community, and I'll offer a tool or a teaching. So to help creatives and artists, and really anyone else who wants to join on their journey to becoming more abundant. And I also offer one-on-one energy healing sessions. So in there, we'll focus on a specific issue to clear around. And once those blocks are removed, people more easily receive what they desire. Like they'll feel some movement in their path so that they can actually move forward. And then, yeah. And the last one is I work in longer programs, one-on-one with creatives and artists. So for people who are desiring, to go deeper into the work and work longer term over time to really get into the nitty gritty of, what's getting in the way of their abundance, of creating practices that will support them on their paths so that, they can really open up to what's available to them.
Wow. That's amazing. So thank you so much, Jacqueline, for today and being a part of the Limitless podcast. All of our amazing listeners, you guys are limitless and limitless creatives. So just keep creating. And if there's any one takeaway that I would say I learned from Jacqueline today is write it down and be specific. So if you have a notepad next to you, just start writing down some of these specific things that you want to create and tapping into your abundant self. So thank you so much for listening to the Limitless podcast. And thank you, Jacqueline, for being on the podcast and sharing some abundant hacks. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. It was a pleasure.